Well, I've been researching the experiences, attitudes, and presumptions of divorced fathers since 1985. Since that time, I've undertaken two major qualitative studies of divorced fathers, each with a sample of 82 fathers spaced 20 years apart. I completed the first study in 1990 and the second in 2010. In my first study in 1985, I started in 1985, finished in 1990. I undertook a study of the impact of divorce on non-custodial fathers and examined why it was that so many non-custodial fathers lost contact with their children after divorce. The research at that time by US sociologist Frank Furstenberg and others found that fully 50% of non-custodial fathers became completely disengaged from their children's lives. Now, parental alienation theory did not exist at that time, and the stereotype of the deadbeat dad prevailed. It was simply assumed that children did not really matter to fathers. It wasn't until years later that a suicide epidemic among divorced fathers was identified, as the highest levels of depression occur among adults who have a child under age 18 with whom they're not actively involved. I wanted to examine what was behind fathers' disengagement from their children's lives. And I confess that when I first undertook this study, I completely bought into the existing stereotypes of the time. As I'd been a child protection worker, mainly working with single mothers and their children, fathers were completely absent in their children's lives. But in my 1985 research completed in 1990, I found that divorced fathers suffer a grief reaction containing all the major elements of a bereavement, tied directly to the loss and absence of their children in their lives, to the loss of their role as fathers, which was kind of a core component of their identity, and the constraints of a visiting relationship, of an avuncular type of relationship whereas they had been quite involved in their children's lives previously. I also found that they were less likely to be blaming their wives as they were blaming a savage and inhumane legal system that robbed their children of their father's love. I also found, surprisingly, a discontinuity between pre and post divorce father-child relationships. I found that often it was the most involved and attached fathers who were more likely to become alienated from their children's lives because they really pushed for and asserted their rights and asserted their desire to be equal parents. And I concluded that fathers' disengagement from their children's lives was the result of parental alienation, essentially, although I didn't use that word, the result of a combination of systemic forces that remove them from their children's lives and their own psychological response to the absence of their children and loss of the father role, etc. In my second study in 2005, I undertook a second study examining the experiences of divorced fathers that was completed in 2010. I wanted to see if the situation had improved for fathers. I assumed that it had improved in those intervening 20 years because fathers were now that much more involved in their children's lives prior to separation. I was also interested in the issue of rights versus responsibilities of fathers. Well, in this second study, I found that the situation had actually gotten worse for fathers and their children. That grief reaction I was talking about in my first study had kind of morphed into a much more of a full-blown post-traumatic stress response for fathers.